One of the areas I'm involved with is some local cemeteries where they have a lot of graves where there aren't any headstones, footstones. So I wanted to see if I could develop a way using my own workshop where I could engrave marble and granite using a sandblaster and put, modern lettering on it, customized for the particular person, and do it very inexpensively so we could get maybe people in the public to sponsor different footstones, and eventually we'd have all the graves in the cemetery addressed. So this is my sample of one that I did, and I'll walk you through the process of how I got there. I learned a lot on YouTube when it comes to upgrading my sandblaster equipment, learning about stencil cutters, learning about how to paint. So I just thought this video I'd give back some information to others. Hopefully they'll learn how to do the same thing. You can certainly use this idea to do engraving of stones, brick, pavers. I just happen to be focused on doing it for the good of one of our local cemeteries. So you can see in the result here, this is a piece of marble. I got the 3 little pieces. They're 6 by 12 at Home Depot. 3 pieces for $8. So pretty good way I could practice some of the things I needed to do to get it to look fairly good. And I've only been doing it a week. This is not a perfect result, but it's got me to the point where I know I can at least be successful if I keep trying. So the sandblaster I've had for years is this Harbor Freight 40-pound unit. It's pretty popular, but it comes pretty bare basic, and if you really wanted to get it to work well, you have to make some improvements to it. I never really did make the improvements. I was mainly using it for real light-duty automotive cleanups on carburetors and things like that. But I thought, if I'm going to be sandblasting granite, I'm going to have to look at every little piece of this and make improvements. So I went through a lot of YouTube videos, saw what other guys did. The first one you can see here is the cover that holds the glass on. It's very difficult to change, or time-consuming to change, so I just put in some blind nuts and swapped around the studs so that I could remove the glass from the top pretty easily. The glass does get etched in heavier use, so you're going to be changing that glass out, maybe once a year for about $5. Just getting down to your local Ace Hardware. Now the machine that I've been using to power the sandblaster is my 5-horse 30-gallon, and if you see the specs there, it's about I think 13 cubic feet per minute, and that's kind of an average performance, but it's adequate for the job I'm doing here. So I'm pretty happy that I don't have to swap that out. One of the first things that I did change out was I put in a spotlight, using a floodlight, which has got a heavy-duty glass on it, and that should be able to stand the abuse of the sandblasting. The light that came with the unit was pretty lousy, and you really kind of want to get rid of that. The next thing I did is on the far wall is where the exhaust port is, and that feeds down to the vacuum cleaner. It's usually just a hole, and that would usually fill up with, you'd see that filling up with some of the media over time down that channel. By putting a cover over it, and this is I 3D printed this, so the air inlet is actually from the bottom. So as the media tries to make its way up the channel, gravity will take over and it'll drop, and so I'll get less media leaving the cabinet and less media going down into the unit, or the vacuum cleaner itself. And then the next thing I added was a dust deputy. This is a way that it'll collect some of that media nice and clean into that bucket in the back there, rather than have it feed it into the vacuum cleaner, which eventually is going to clog the filters up there, and I'd have to be changing that pretty regularly. So this has been a nice addition. The other addition that everybody's done is the one big problem with this system is it doesn't draw up the media very well from the bottom using the stock tube. You have to basically, one of the fixes is use a double tube setup, one that puts air down to the bottom of the pickup, so it kind of gets some air for the media to grab onto as it's getting suctioned up into the gun itself. So I built that based on the way people have been using it on the internet, and it's made a remarkable difference. The next thing I changed was, or didn't change really, but I just looked at my gun setup. I just made sure that everything was working there. This is a pretty good gun. It's not the one that comes with it, but I did change it out a few years ago, and it makes it easy to change the tips. You can lubricate the valve, and everything is pretty good and solid on it, so the gun's good. The one thing that I did want to look at a little closer was the nozzle itself. It turns out mine is 3/16, which is uses a lot of air. It may be a little bit more than I need for what I'm doing for the close-in work here with the lettering. So I did order an 1/8 inch also, so I'll be trying that out. But this particular one, it works pretty good as it is. Now the media I've been using is kind of this fine coal, crushed coal particulate. I guess what's it called? It's this black diamond blasting adhesive. They come in like 4 different grades. I believe I got the fine, but it's really the marking on the top there, which gives the size of it is gone. So I really don't even know if I have fine, but it kind of feels like fine to me. So the next step is to talk about making a template. And as you see here, what did I end up using for making this particular first example was pretty thick Mylar cut on the machine that I'll show you next, which is a Cricut maker. It's turns out this time of year with Christmas coming on, they had them. They're usually $400 now. I got this one for like $2.25 on Amazon. Came right away, and it's been a very reliable machine. But it has a cutting knife is the primary thing, and then you have what they call a cutting mat. That's that blue thing there, and then you put your cutting material. In this case, I'm showing this 7mm Mylar stuck on here. It's kind of a tacky surface on that blue mat, and then it just pulls that mat in and then does the cutting based on what you've drawn in the design for the program, which runs off of your PC or Mac, and you can even use other systems, but the software is pretty straightforward. It comes with lots of fonts, and it's pretty much ready to go. So here's the example of a couple different materials that they're usually used for these cutters. These are vinyl rolls, usually 12 inches wide, which is the size of the Cricut cutter, and you can get them in various widths, and there's a million different colors. There's a style that's they're both adhesive back, but the adhesive on one of them allows you to reposition. So if you, let's say, make a pattern that you want to put on a wall, and then eventually you want to be able to take it off the wall without pulling the paint off the wall, you can get that style. And then there's the other kind that has more of a permanent adhesive on it, and you can even use those on automobile bumpers and so forth. And then on the right, this is what's called transfer tape. You put that over top of your cutout on the material as you're transferring it to whatever surface you're going to put it on after you take the backing off the material itself. So it kind of holds all the letters together, or patterns, or whatever things you got on there. So those are the 3 basic things you would normally have. Now for the purpose that I'm doing, which is making stencils, we would use this Mylar material. And then with that, we would be cutting out our lettering, and then if you look closely at one of the problems you have when you're doing letters, if you have things like the 9 and the 8 and even the G over here where you're going to have the center section that's going to be hanging loose. Obviously, when you're going to be sandblasting, it's going to be very hard to hold that piece in place on the marble, in my case. And so one of the tricks is to attach it with a little bit of the stencil material to the main part of the stencil, and then afterwards you can go in and fill in that area with your paint, or you could even engrave out that little section there if you're going to be doing kind of a deep sandblast of each of the letters. So there is a little bit of follow through you have to do based on the lettering system that you're using. So after you get the blasting done, and that the stencil does have to be removed. It's kind of destroyed. It gets beat up pretty good with the sandblasting if you're going to be going deep enough. And I've had to work on how to adhere the Mylar to the marble. So in order for all the edges and all the little pieces within the lettering be able to keep that nice and firm on the surface of the stone, so that the sandblasting doesn't knock them loose or lift an edge, which basically destroys the etching that I'm trying to do on it. So you do have to kind of glue this on there. I've tried a number of different ways to paint the inside of the sandblasted lettering, and what seems to work the best at the moment is I'll cut another template identical to the Mylar template. I'll usually make it out of the releasable regular vinyl material, and then put that in place over the stone exactly where the lettering is, and then I'll use that as a stencil for painting, because it wouldn't cause any damage to it. But obviously there's still problems with a little bit of bleeding of the paint through the edges of the lettering, and so there's different methods you can do to kind of minimize that bleeding, but sometimes there's some cleanup you have to do after you do the lettering. And the fact that the stone is a rock and it's got an imperfect surface, there's going to be a little bit of bleed, most likely, no matter what you try to do. But what I'm working on now is different techniques for holding down the template, both for the and you can't probably really see it too good in the picture there, but I've made 3 different sections here. One where the Mylar template is being held down by contact cement, and then one in the middle that I'm holding it down with rubber cement, and then on the right I'm using 3M spray adhesive and letting each of those cure properly for several hours, and then I'm going to go sandblast them and see how they withstand a deeper sandblasting session. So kind of not done with the project, but I just thought I would take some time today and just go through what I've done as far as the sandblasting cabinet upgrades and the things I've done to kind of get to the point where I can do some sandblasting of some lettering on marble and granite, and who knows where it'll lead. But I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.